Hi, folks. How are you doing? I am excited. Are you excited?
Very much, yeah.
Are you excited? I'm excited. And I just want to welcome everybody to this electrifying third edition of After Dark Chat. I'm Chadwick Clark, your guide and your host. I will be navigating you through this night of knowledge as a learning and development specialist at the African Caribbean Council on HIV/AIDS in Ontario, ACCHO. What an ignited night it will be. And you might be asking, what would have caused After Dark Chat? And what is its real significance? Now, this groundbreaking concept was a brainchild of yours truly. And it's really a social media series that is designed to destroy misconceptions that surrounded critical subjects such as HIV, sex, stigma, sexuality, right? And this topic that we'll be chatting on tonight is it the system or us that is perpetuating the trauma around HIV/AIDS stigma? And what we really mean by that? I mean, oftentimes newcomer, they come to Canada with fear, trauma, stigma from their home country, right? And it's nerve-wracking to be in this country. And so because of the fear and the stigma that they have carried, they somewhat deny themselves support, healthcare, etc. They're afraid of the stigmatization that they might face. And worse, if they might get in contact with somebody that is from their home country. But let's think about the other hand, right? The system has failed us significantly. As African Caribbean Black folks, the system has failed us due to systemic barriers and because the stigma that folks are experiencing, they're not even willing to disclose, so they're not able to get help or access. And it's because how the system is set up that is really causing this. It is further compounded by the HIV criminalization laws and legislations and how it affects African Caribbean Black folks that are living with HIV. So the real question tonight is it the system or us? Which is it? So this evening, we will be looking on 5 core pillars, and they are stigma, it is disclosure, it is systemic barriers, mental health, and successes. As we embark on this journey, the time is fitting as we celebrate Black History Month and our collective conversation that we will have will help to shatter the silence surrounding this critical topic. So let's start by introducing ourselves and meeting the panel that I have here in this amazing actual living room this evening. And I'll start with the gentleman on my far right.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, folks at home. My name is Tony Black. I'm a registered social worker in private practice. I own my own counseling practice called Dynamic Change Counseling and Consulting Services.
Nice, thank you.
My name is Megan Cook. I work for Positive Living Niagara as a community development and education coordinator for Positive Living Niagara. I'm working specifically within the African, Caribbean, and Black community.
Nice, welcome, Megan.
Thank you.
My name is Grace Chabuka. I'm from Zimbabwe. I just arrived in Canada. I'm a person living with HIV and I love it. And I'm here to discuss that.
Thank you, Grace. I appreciate you being here with us tonight.
Hi, everyone. My name is Joy Adebayo Yetor. I'm the African, Caribbean, and Black Program Coordinator at Moyo Health and Community Services. We service majorly the Peel region.
Nice. Thank you, Joy.
Dina Soje. I'm a registered social worker who works in the ACB community and supporting people living with HIV and AIDS.
Hi, my name is Renee, coming from the AIDS Network. I'm an outreach worker for the ACB community, coming all the way from Hamilton.
Thank you, everyone, for introducing yourselves. At least everybody online, at least you know the different persons here. All right, and what we want to go to next is setting the stage. So we have two subject matter experts. We have a counselor, which is Tony, and we have our social worker, which is Lena. And so I'll ask Lena to go ahead and put down some profound statements to set the stage for this evening conversation.
So in 2014, UNAIDS launched the 1990 Fast Track Initiative in an aim to get every person who was HIV positive to know their status, to be an antiretroviral, and to be virally suppressed. And so this was supposed to be happening in 2020, but as we can see, the target was extended until 2030. Canada committed to achieving the 95-95-95 target by ensuring that all people with HIV have access to medication, treatment, and diagnosis by 2025. We are in 2024, and from where I'm sitting, I don't think that will happen for us. It may happen for some, but as for Black ACB community, I don't see it happening.
That's alarming, Lena.
Yeah. We come a long way. We have a lot of achievement in terms of HIV treatment, care, research, and support. However, research shows us that the ACB community are being left behind, and we are not in conversation when it comes to prevention and care. We know that we make up like 25% of the HIV cases in Ontario are for ACB people, except we are only 5%. So we need to ask ourselves why, right? Why is that happening? And I would say that it's happened because Black people continue to experience challenges accessing healthcare. It happened because of structural barriers such as unjust laws. You spoke about that a while ago. Policies, institutional practice, homophobia, racism, inequality in healthcare. This is why we are here, and this is why we're struggling. We are not all at the same. We are all at this. We may be on the same journey, but we are not walking the same road. So we are here to discuss and talk about ways that we could really move forward and support each other and get in there together as a Black community.
I like that. I like that. And so, Tony, what do you say?
Well, in terms of mental health, I kind of want to just identify some of the mental health conditions, emotional conditions that I encounter with many of the folks that I work with who are newly arrived from Africa, from the African continent or from the Caribbean. I'll go into some of them a bit more later on, but for right now, I'm just going to briefly give some highlights. So depression is one of the main things that folks arrive here with. And depression is often symptomized by needing to isolate a lot, having a desire to harm yourself or not look out for your own welfare, and just a loss of hope. When I have no sense that there's anything positive in my future, if I feel like all is lost, then what reason do I have to look after myself, to look after my health if I have no hope? So depression is a major cause of people not looking after their health. Limiting beliefs. Many of us grew up with parents or adults or in school being told that we're stupid, that we will amount to nothing, that we're no good. Some of us grew up in the church where we're told that HIV is the punishment of God for our sins. Yep. And so when we hear those things repeated over and over and over, eventually we begin to believe them. Eventually we hold on to those beliefs and they keep us from fulfilling our purpose, from moving forward with our lives. Self-hatred. Self-hatred basically says, I have no worth and no one values me. And when you feel as if you have no worth and nobody cares about you or loves you, again, why would I want to care about myself? Why would I want to look after myself?
That's true.
Shame. Shame is when we own our negative, our experiences from our past, when we own them as being a part of who we are, then we feel as if I haven't done something bad or something bad wasn't done to me. I am bad. I own that negative experience as part of myself. As a result, I can't disclose it. I can't talk to anybody about it because it's not just something apart from me, it's part of who I am that causes me all the shame. And my phone just closed. The last one that I have here is trauma. PTSD often causes us to change our beliefs about ourselves, other people, and about the world in general in order to try to understand what happened to us or to protect ourselves in the future. So as I said, some of those I'll expand on later on, but for now, we'll leave it at that.
Thank you so much, Tony. Profound. Megan, we want to look on stigma. In your neck of the woods,
how does stigma looks like? What are some of your experiences so far?
So I think the important piece when it comes to that destigmatization is that education. So obviously, as my job as an education coordinator, it's really focusing on debunking some of the myths. One of my favorite quotes is right knowledge corrects wrong behavior. So when we educate people, you reduce that fear, you reduce the myths that when I go into a grocery store, I just did an education presentation the other day with newcomers in Niagara, and somebody questioned whether or not you could get HIV from touching the same thing in a grocery store. I said, like, if that was the case, we'd all be living with HIV, right? Like, we're all out here squeezing the oranges or the melons.
Right.
We'd all be living with HIV. So
Right.
part of my job is just creating that awareness and the knowledge to really bring back that stigma. Yeah.
Good. Grace, somebody that's living with HIV, from back, how is it as it relates to from stigma related from back home versus here? How your experiences have been?
Okay, thank you very much. I would say in Africa, the stigma is predominantly starting from self-stigma. The moment you are diagnosed, you start blaming, self-blame. And then the other stigma is also from the carers themselves. Like when you go to the hospital, you're trying to get the resupply of medication, you may actually get hostility. It's like they are blaming you as well. And where I used to take my medication, they would actually separate us to say outpatients for opportunistic infections and then outpatients for other ailments. So already that's discrimination.
Of course.
And then when I came here, I was actually very surprised because there was kind of embracing. Everybody was welcoming, but it wasn't like that at first. Obviously, the stigma would be where you arrive, when you are in shelter, you don't even want the next person to know, and you are even sharing accommodation. You are so much in fear of who will know, what will they say, will they accept me, am I accepted, those kind of things. So stigma can also be among the people you live with, among your acquaintances, your workplace, and even the community at large.
And Greg, you said something about in Zimbabwe and being here in Canada and the difference in treatment. But the reality for a lot of people is that they don't receive those kind of treatments. Stigma still exists in Canada. And we are still continue to fight stigma. People are excluded from community events. So even if you are, and I'm from the Caribbean, so I can talk about Caribbean. Even if you are here in Canada, people bring the values that Tony talked about, the belief, all that here with them. They don't leave it behind. So that's something that
Yeah, one of the things when I was chatting with my supervisor about doing one of these presentations, she said, like, in Niagara, we're a much, much smaller town than Toronto. Even I feel like we're several years behind Hamilton. But she said, like, 15 years ago, when we had a client living with HIV, they would like block off the whole ward. And that's here in Canada, where, again, like Grace and I were talking on the train on the way in, like, we have to send people to the dentist in Hamilton. Like, if you're living with HIV in Niagara, the dentists won't treat you. Orthopedic surgeons. I was chatting with one of our case managers, and she said, a GP, like just a general practitioner, found out somebody was living with HIV and wouldn't touch that person. So there's even stigma within the medical field, and the smaller the towns are, the more stigma is attached. And it's hard for somebody who's living with HIV to not stigmatize yourself when everybody's treating you poorly.
Yeah.
Wow. That's deep. That's very deep. And I think we have a question from the chat. I know there were some persons who would have seen the link that can actually ask questions. So I will go straight to that now, and let's see how.
Good night, everyone. I am a newcomer to Canada, and I feel like I'm currently able to live my best life as a queer person. I heard that there is no HIV in Canada, but my friend whom I moved with just got infected. So, how do I protect myself, especially as an ACB person, bearing in mind in the current HIV statistics in the ACB community compared to other marginalized community? Thank you.
Rooney, you want to take that one? Like, how do you protect? How would you recommend to this individual how to protect themselves in a space like this?
Sorry, I've got a throat. Yeah, but I would say, as far as disclosure is concerned, it takes a lot to get the information right. So there are so many systems. Like, I come from AIDS Network, and as an outreach worker, we've got a lot of systems that are in place for people living with HIV. And there are confidentiality forms and policies that protect individuals, including staff and the community. But I would also say, I guess, as far as even disclosing is concerned, there are now certain ways that people get information. It's obviously, when you now know your status, you need to get the right information and disclose to the right people. So that's on its own is a mission.
I know
because
when to disclose, right?
Yeah, because it also takes the courage, and like you said, people come from the trauma, people come from different backgrounds, and it also requires a strong mental health for you to even disclose. So for me, disclosure is something that it's tough, but it also requires a lot of information. And I think also we also have certain systems that now guide us when one is tested and you realize that you're actually infected. They try to guide you as far, because of that, maybe that stigma that is already there, but at least they try to give you full information. And AIDS Network, has a lot of coverage around, HIV people. So.
Yeah, and I would encourage newcomers to come to Canada, and because you were tested before you come in, that's part of the immigration system. And if you come in negative, don't forget the lessons that you learned from back home. Because I heard a lot of you when I was working in the sector, and we would do workshop, and people would say there's no AIDS in Canada, because there's nothing. I went to visit. I was in Nigeria, and there was billboards everywhere. Everywhere, the conversation on the radio, everybody talking about HIV and AIDS. But in Canada here, nobody talking. So people think that this is such a country that there's no HIV. And the sexual practices that they had in their home country, they just forgo it because they think that everybody is safe here. So I would say continue your sexual practices that you did back in your home country. Seek out support, go online, check out agency and find out what is going on. But the thing that I would say that yes, HIV is live and well in Canada, and continue your sexual practices that protect you from becoming infected.
But while you're also on leave, remember that people get various visas to get into Canada. So it's not everyone who is going to get tested.
Yeah.
Because for people coming from my country, you can get a visitor's visa without getting tested. So you're actually approved for that.
Okay.
So now the danger is, from conversations with people. So if you are not protected yourself and then you sleep with a traveler, what are the chances of you being positive? They're very high because you don't know where they're coming from. So it's not everyone who knows their status. And this is someone and some people also, don't forget, people come into Canada as visitors and then they do all sorts of changes, work permits, asylum-seeking students, and all those kind of changes. So no one really knows at what stage to disclose because you don't know. It's different, I think, even like you're saying, it's different when you come in knowing that you're positive or you're coming in knowing that you're already negative. But then when you get positive, what information is readily available for you to know, because people don't know also when to get tested.
Right.
Do you get what I mean?
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah.
I want to say that a lot of all these beliefs that we come from back home, a lot of people don't realize that it is during like the newcomer stage when you just come in that a lot of people get infected with HIV. Yes, that is like a very common phenomenon. People come in and they're negative and all of that gallivanting, and also like I won't say gallivanting, that's the wrong word, but like all of that period where like you're lonely, you need like the support, you're having like unprotected sex, for example, and like you don't within that period, like you could get HIV. So I would also add that there are a list of, I know on ACCHO's website, and like if you go online, there's a list of like PrEP clinics in Ontario that you could go. So even if you are like to protect yourself as a newcomer, you can get access to PrEP and to PrEP and all about vaccines and all that. You can get that in the PrEP clinics that are available current that are in Ontario. Thank you.
That's nice. And I mean, the questions are still coming in, and I think we have one more person with a question to throw to the panel. So we just throw to that. No?
Hi, Tony. How does somebody living with shame and trauma, how how does he come out of it positively?
So I think the person says, how does shame and trauma, right? How does a person get over shame and trauma after having HIV and of course moving to a new country?
Well, I think one of the most important things is to begin to take risks. If I believe that everybody that I speak to and disclose my status, if I'm positive, if I believe that every time I disclose I'm going to be rejected or judged or denied services or denied something, denied friendship, denied sex, then I'm not going to disclose. But the issue is that the more I do that, the more I choose not to disclose in order to protect myself from being judged or being harmed, the more I reinforce the idea that if I disclose, I'm going to be judged. So sometimes it's about taking a risk. Sometimes it's about just being able to gauge the people that you're around and kind of determine whether or not you believe that someone has the values that will be able to receive your disclosure in the way that is in a healthy way. Sometimes you're going to be hurt. A risk means that when we take risks, there's always the opportunity, always the chance that we're going to be hurt or that things are going to go wrong. But without risk, we're not going to be able to prove to ourselves that our current beliefs about being rejected, being judged, etc., we won't have a chance to remove those ideas.
I'm going to go a little bit more and say that I think that the onus is always on people living with HIV. I think we need to shift the lens to go on society, because a lot of these stigma is not like we know there's internalized stigma, but a lot of it is also enacted stigma. It's enacted stigma that society showed us, the medical system, people that your neighbors. There was a study that was done in 2006, I think, asking in Canada by Health Canada, asking people that if you would be friends or eat from somebody with HIV and all these other stuff, and people saying it was appalling to hear the result. And then the study was done 10 years later, and there was not any shift. So we need to start with making sure that it's safe for people to disclose, right? To making sure that people are safe. And if somebody is struggling and they're feeling shame, blame, join a support group where people are able to support you, go to see you, Tony, to walk through some of those things, because those things are not just it doesn't come to them like that. It's created through trauma. I remember in the 1990s, how kids who were living with HIV, born with HIV, were treated in school. They weren't allowed to go. And these kids now have serious mental health issues. It's not because because of anything they do, but it was what happened to them, the trauma that happened to them. So these are some of the things we need to look at as how the system impact the way how we look at trauma and how we treat each other.
Grace, for somebody who would have recently come to Canada, how it felt. I mean, you heard Tony speak about, taking risk and that, we should brace ourselves to accept some of the backlash. How was that for you though? Coming out, were you nervous? Were you afraid? Were you hesitant to seek support when you got here? How was your experience?
For me, it was traumatic at first, to be honest. I've been living with HIV for 29 years. I'll be celebrating my 30th. I'll be celebrating my 30th year in May because it was 1994. So the thing is, when you are coming to a new country, and I'm from the village kind of setting, and you are coming to a first world, here's the thing, you just think, am I going to be injected? There will be so many uncertainties, so many unanswered questions, so many fears, so many anxieties. So when I came, I didn't even want to say it at first, to say, I'm living with HIV. And yet I'm someone who's bubbly, who is even on YouTube. Everybody in my country and on social media, I mean, they know I'm living with HIV for that long. But when I came here, to be honest, I had a lot of mixed feelings, a lot of fear, and also shame, kind of, because each time you mention, people kind of look at you with another eye, you know, different from that, you know, confidence. And so it's a lot of mixed feelings, really. You are excited. I'm in the first world. I'm going to get the best medication. But all the same, you are so scared. Especially with this shared accommodation. Let me repeat this. Because, like, you need to be accepted. And you don't know who to tell. You don't know who to trust. You don't even know where to go. Where should I start? Should I even go to my caseworker? And will they not judge me? So it was really quite difficult. But like he said, you need to be a risk taker. And so I said to myself, I'm living and I have to go on. And I have to be positive.
Of course.
And I have to accept that I shouldn't fight reality. This is it. Then I had to step out. So, is there any positive, you know, organizations here? Then I knew about positive living. Then I had to walk in and say, hi guys, I'm living with HIV. You know, and they're like, okay, and who told you about us? I had to Google. So you see, sometimes you don't really have to rely on people, especially with this Mr. Google. To be honest with you, I found it on Google. I never even told anybody. And they later on knew about it on World AIDS Day when I told them, I'm going to be speaking, guys, telling my story. What story? I'm living with HIV. Like, okay, really? But you're so bubbly. And I'm saying, hello, should I be having pity parties?
No, not at all.
I drive. I work. I'm a professional. Come on. So it's really how you present yourself sometimes. But of course, when you are coming, you are scared, you are timid, you know, you have mixed feelings. That's what I would say.
If I could just finish responding to that question from the audience member. So a couple other things. I think Lena may have mentioned it. Being in groups of others who share your condition, share your experience, so that you know that you're not alone. Oftentimes, because of isolation, because especially when you're new to this country and it's winter out and you're hibernating indoors, we don't understand that we're not alone. So that's the one thing. The other thing is treatment, getting counseling for trauma. Trauma is what happens to us. PTSD is what can happen if we don't engage with the memory, if we don't engage with the emotions. If we avoid all that stuff, then we end up with PTSD. What PTSD often does is that it changes our beliefs about who we are, about other people, and just about the world in general, where we believe that nobody's safe for us, we can't trust anybody. We have no control or power in our own lives. We don't have the ability to be intimate with anybody because we don't love ourselves, so how can we share ourselves with others? Until we get resolve some of those beliefs that are unhealthy, that come out of the trauma, we're going to continue to suffer. So thank you for that.
There's also that belief that I feel like people always feel there's always the onus on people who are living with HIV to always disclose their status. You don't have to do that. At least on paper, it's your fundamental human right to not have to disclose your status. So you should hold on to that. Newcomers always think, oh, you have to disclose your status. You have to tell everybody that this is what I'm struggling with. You need to tell everybody I'm living with. You don't have to tell only the people who you need to, who your healthcare providers, and the only people that you owe that information. Every other person, You don't like you don't owe them.
Yep. And I just want to add there, I don't want our newcomers to feel, sometimes they might be so abrasive that the person in the community, the person that you go to for support, or even just general person, you might just go to, they'd get your glasses, but because you're on ODSP, they look at you and say, but what's your disability? You don't look, right? And then sometimes it makes it seems like you must disclose before you get access to care. The truth is, it's none of their business, really. It's none of their business. And so you have a right to say no, right? Or I will not answer that question. Or you have a right to step out and find somewhere else that will give you the care or the service that you need. As Joy said, you have a right not to disclose just to the persons who you want to disclose to, like your family doctor who will be giving you treatment, maybe your pharmacist, right? And maybe your sexual partner, if you choose to. But no random person. Don't feel like you're entitled to give that information.
There was a time when we were asked at our shelter, can you please fill in this form? Write your medications that you are taking. And I said, who needs it? I'm not going to fill it. And they were like, why? I said, excuse me, can you explain to me why you need it? Where is it going to? I'm not. And I did not. They don't even know. I mean, they don't have to. So sometimes, really, you don't have to. You don't have to even disclose.
That's it. Really?
You know, as far as disclosure is concerned, I highlighted quite just a few things that I want to say. You realize that besides being just a newcomer, the power of information, if you don't know, sometimes maybe there could have been an interaction to the drug they want to give you, right? So they ask sometimes for that purpose. This is why they ask, do you drink? Do you take any other drugs? So I feel from what I've written, disclosure is tough due to so many reasons. So there has to be a lot of awareness on how to handle disclosure, including the healthcare itself, that system itself.
True.
Because that's where it starts from, where you want to get your glasses, but they're asking you about all these other things. There's a difference between, when someone is sick and they really have to give you an antibiotic, right? But then it also comes by having to also disclose. And this is the part where some people are also not ready because people don't know how much they're supposed to disclose.
Yes.
And some people, maybe the way it's even asked, are there other people listening? And it's a lot. And for me, having to be working and having to be in the system for quite a long time, it's something that disturbs me because even the healthcare system itself, not even the outside community, that we can say, okay, fine, they don't know how to handle, HIV itself. But even the ones that are saying, they're in the system, they don't know how to handle these kind of questions. So if I'm going to be asked that question, who am I going to disclose to? How am I going to respond? Because maybe I want to tell you, but I already see someone passing through and I don't feel comfortable being heard. So what happens?
Right.
Also, there's some toolkits that was developed by Women's Health and Women's Fund in terms of how to disclose. Like if somebody wanted to disclose, there's a series of phases, like thinking about it, planning how to disclose, the support you need to put in place. Like it was really a good tool that could be used to help people who wanted to disclose, knowing that, as you said, disclosure is not a mandatory thing.
Right. And as Rooney talking about question, there's one more question there that they'd want to throw at us. So we can shift to that question now and see how best we can answer.
Good night, panelists. My question is, what are the social and structural factors that impact stigma reduction?
Social and structural factors that impact stigma reduction. I think some of the social factors and structural factors. So I'll talk about the structural factors first. Laws. We talk about laws in terms of like criminalization. right? That impacts stigma. That defeats when it comes to stigma reduction. Because if you want to talk about reducing stigma, we need to put things in place to make sure that when people disclose, that they go hand in hand. Or people, you find out people who are living with HIV, you don't discriminate against them.
My question is.
Okay, could continue.
Yeah. So it was about stigma reduction, right? So if you have laws that prevent it, and there's no stigma. Another thing is that when we talk about stigma reduction, is there tools that is in place? We have tons of, when it comes to research, there's tons of research with good stigma reduction tools in Africa, in America. Not a lot in Canada. There's a few in Canada but mostly we adopt stuff from either Africa or America. But then also when we look at it is that we have population that comes from the Caribbean who experience HIV in a different way than for people in Africa. So you can't use the same tools to take. So I think it's looking at people as an individual, developing tools that work, taking from best practices from every way to help in terms of stigma reduction. So there's I know that in Canada here there was a tool developed by Josephine Wong and a set of researchers into this called ACT, the acceptance commitment therapy, where you intentionally meet people and did that. And they did it with not only, that's another thing. You don't just, you look at people with HIV, they did it with community, churches, everywhere, where people experience those kind of things. So I think we need a universal system, a holistic system that includes everyone in terms of stigma reduction.
Yes, cultural competency is very important, like to be able to know that like people come from different diverse backgrounds, different systems, they're coming from different countries, and be able to marry all these things and be able to provide like the best care possible for them. So I think that it's very important that the healthcare community goes through competency training to make sure that people are being able to be cared for properly.
Yeah, for sure. That's the thing with the ACB community, right? Like we
Yes.
are all coming from different backgrounds and we all have things that work and don't work for us, right?
Yes.
Things that might work for Grace isn't going to work from somebody from Trinidad. Yeah.
Especially because we have not even had reasons to trust the system to be
Exactly.
historically. We have not.
And I think there's a next question. Again, that's there, and I think we're answering the question beautifully. Right. So kudos to my panelists. And so keep the questions coming in. Keep sending the videos. We appreciate them, and we will see how best we can fit everybody in the conversation. So we really appreciate that. I could jump to one that's here. Let me read it here.
Comment on just on the stigma, please.
Sure,
Real
yeah.
quick. One of the things that I came across the other day was in social services we have different treatment manuals that should be updated from time to time, but they're not. I recently went through a manual that was last reprinted in 2016, and in a list of coping skills, it had one coping skill: protect yourself sexually because HIV is a death sentence. When I saw that and that I was still using that, I was shocked. And so since then, I've started going through all my material to ensure that none of my material has those kind of words on it.
Just to add on that, while you're speaking even on that stigma that is there, people have so much centralized HIV with sexual stuff. That's not only the case. There's breastfeeding for women. It's funny how people want to judge other people and put that stigma, and that's already a barrier because you don't know. Maybe one is born.
I relate to that because I had a child when I was already on medication, and then when I wanted to breastfeed my child and the child was negative, and then they kept saying, "So you want to infect the baby?" I'm like, I think it's lack of knowledge because I'm undetectable. I can breastfeed. I can breastfeed my baby just like any other mother. So I think lack of knowledge also can also lead to that because breastfeeding, when you are actually taking your antiretroviral treatment, it's fine.
That's where U equal U comes in.
No, but it's fine. We gotta be careful. It's fine in southern country, but not in Canada. In Canada, you can lose your children if you breastfeed. So that's the thing. We have to put it in perspective.
Oh yeah. Oh
In
yeah.
Canada, if you
Oh yeah.
breastfeed, because there's a program in place, Health Canada put a program in place where the pregnant women, women who are pregnant or have babies, have free formula until the child is 1 year. That's people could access. So people take the chance and they breastfeed. And if they breastfeed, please do not tell anybody you breastfeed because children aids will come and take your children.
Why
Just
is that
say it.
discriminatory
Yeah.
against mothers who are infected with HIV?
But not just that, but then it goes against U equal
U
U.
equals U, yeah.
Yes.
Because when the U equal U was created, we have to understand the study was done again. Women were not included in that study. So you can't use that science to justify. Women were not included in that study, and that's something we have to talk about. When studies are done, who is included in those studies? Right? That's a different
It's
conversation.
very rarely
Yeah.
Black women.
Exactly.
Yes.
Well, I didn't know about that one.
Yeah.
I did not. So
Yeah.
So are you saying here in Canada you cannot breastfeed when you are HIV positive?
No. People, like I was saying, I know a lot because I work in the sector. I know a lot of people who breastfeed, but you can't go and tell people that you're breastfeeding because you could lose your children. You know, there's cases. We know of cases where children have been taken because it's like, yeah.
Even when you're undetectable? No.
Changes, right? You could be undetectable today and then not undetectable tomorrow. There's too much science to it.
Okay.
Not a scientist, but yeah.
There's a question here. It says, I have HIV, but I find that I can't tell anyone around me. They automatically treat me weird. It makes me feel ashamed, as people think I must be dirty, a dirty slut, to have been infected. What can family, friends, and ally do to advocate for testing and less stigma and discrimination?
I think one thing that they can do is, first things first, the way that we treat people who are living with HIV is very important. We should not treat them weirdly or differently. I know that like we don't realize it, but like even some as people struggle with like mental health disorders, you see that like when you disclose your status, you see that people automatically, there's a shift. You can see it in their eyes and like in the way that they treat you. They claim that they are treating you normally, but they really are not. And it's the same thing with like people who struggle with it, who live with HIV too. You see that like there's a shift in the way people treat you, in the way that like they communicate with you. There's a certain like, how do I put it? As if they are looking down on you, that there's a certain moral superiority that they possess, that they now like they use like when they are advocate. So that is the first step that family and friends need to do. Allies also need to like, you need to be, it's the way that you treat the people who live with HIV, that people see you do, that is the way that they would people would learn from you. You are the walking billboard for how you want your family and friends to be treated. So that is something that I think that is very important that family and friends need to do.
I think, okay, I want to say, if you have been diagnosed, the first thing is you look for other people who are also living with HIV. For me, it helped me a lot because I would look at the person and say, "Oh, they're just as normal." Because like he said, AIDS was a death sentence. For us, they would always say, AIDS kills, and the first thing you think is death. So if you are tested and you are diagnosed and you are positive, look for people who are also positive. Then we have what we call community building, where we have support groups, where we can meet. So what are the side effects that you are facing? So which tablets are you taking? So I think this person who is saying, I have HIV, but I'm afraid and what, they should look for support groups. They should look for, even on social media, for groups, WhatsApp groups, Facebook groups, all these, there are so many groups of people living with HIV who can actually, even professionals, who can actually tell you to say, you know what, go for degrees, go and study, go and do a driving course, go and do a computer course, have children, be normal. So sometimes it's the people we acquaint ourselves with. So for this person, I would encourage them to surround themselves with the right people. Support system is very important because people either mold you or break you. So if you go and join these groups, like when I had to Google, and I really love it because we meet, we have fun, we do like those board games.
Yes.
We do a lot of improv,
Yes.
I love it. And sometimes I say, where were you guys when we were, when I was just lonely and homesick. So I really love it, seriously. So it's important for this person who asked that question to say, what do I do? I have been diagnosed of HIV. Look for us, look for groups, look for support systems. And if you go to even these counselors, social work, they will tell you to, come certain days, certain months, or whenever,
Right.
to meet with other people who walked that road.
Perfect. And as you speak about that, we have another question there online, and we'll just shoot to that, because they are coming in, and I want them to ask us the questions because they are exactly the persons we want to assist this evening with this conversation.
Good night, everyone. So, what are some of the negative impacts of the stigma affecting people living with HIV?
I think some of the negative stigma of HIV is it limits people from getting tested. I think somebody spoke about that. People who are HIV, in terms of retention to care and support, they don't go. I could talk a bit about, let's talk about children who were born HIV, who was virally suppressed when they leave pediatric hospital and going into adult care. And because of the treatment and the stigma that happened, they don't go back to clinics. You know what I mean? When we see the young people dying with HIV in this day and age, that should never happen. But are we looking to see where are they in terms of care? Because people just fall off the cracks and nobody even look at of what's going on. Low adherence to medication. People feel like, as Tony said, nobody cares about them. They don't want to take medication. They don't want to. Again, disclosure. You talk about disclosure. Why would I disclose if there's so much negative reason? Like, if I tell somebody and I'm going to be treated negative, I've been treated negative, my chance of telling somebody else that I'm HIV, I wouldn't. So these are some of those low self-esteem, mental health issue because you're dealing with stigma and all this other stuff, depression, you can't get out of bed, you know what I mean? Hopelessness, we all talk about it. So those are some of those really concrete, so there's no motivation. You don't want to get out of bed. You don't want to see people because of stigma.
Yeah, the fact that we still have in this country people of dying from AIDS is just mind-blowing to me. I'm going to direct this question back to Grace, but U equals U is a thing, right? Do you mind explaining that a little bit?
Okay, here's the thing. When you are tested for HIV, it means the virus has gotten into you, and this virus will replicate. By replicating, I mean if it was 1, it will go to 2, it will go to 4, it will go to 8, 16, 32, and all that. So when you start, these days, it's now test and treat. So when you get tested and you are HIV positive, you start treatment. And when we mean treatment, we mean taking antiretroviral treatment so that they do not replicate. So when you are taking these medications, it means at a certain period when you constantly and at the same time take the medication, it means when you go back, maybe 6 months or so, you go back to get tested, the virus is now undetectable. And when we mean undetectable, it doesn't mean it's no longer there. It's now dormant. It was made to lie or to be just dormant. It's not replicating, it's not active. So when we're saying a person is undetectable, they cannot transmit the virus, especially by sex or through sex. So when we say U equals U, we are saying this person has the virus, yes, but it's dormant, it's not active, it's not replicating, it's not multiplying. And this person cannot transmit or infect anybody.
Sexually.
Because
you still can pass the virus through needle use and or
Exactly.
blood to blood. But sexually, yeah, breast milk,
So undetectable, untransferable,
sexually.
Untransmittable.
untransmittable.
But
Okay.
still practice safe sex.
But
Safe sex.
of
Yes.
course.
Well, if you're undetectable, you don't have to.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And there's science. There's been scientific, and because we have criminalization in Canada, and we've known a lot of, especially people from our community who have been criminalized, there's scientific proof that if you are undetectable, you are untransmittable, right?
It's safer to have sex with somebody who's undetectable than somebody who doesn't know their status.
Yep.
And let me just give a real practical example. I met somebody who was interested in me,
That's nice.
and then I even had to call my social worker and say, what do I do?
Yes.
This guy says he's negative. We have never gone for tests. Should I tell him? He says, of course not. You are undetectable. I'm like, will I not be sued? He says, what do you mean, Grace? You are undetectable. You do not have to disclose because you are undetectable. But I was so scared. Then I just said, if he doesn't like me, that's it. So I had to tell him, and he says, oh, okay, let me also go and get tested then. And do you know there are some people who don't even know the difference between HIV and AIDS in Canada? I was so surprised. And the person was just like, so tell me, Grace, are you okay? I mean, this is a 50-something-year-old. I'm expecting people who are young, perhaps coming from school, like high school, to be saying, so what does it take to be HIV positive or something like that? A 50 plus. They don't know. And I had to take them to the social worker to explain verbally, word by word, to go through it and explain all these concepts. So sometimes we think people know, people don't.
But I think disclosure is very different in lots of different countries too, right? So, for example, we had a newcomer who was undetectable, living in the hotels as an asylum seeker, and somebody came into his room looking for sex, and he just like froze because he didn't know what the disclosure laws were here in Canada. Even though he's been undetectable for over 6 months, he doesn't have to disclose. And he just did not. He called us crying because he was like, I didn't know what to do. So like the loneliness is causing people to seek that intimacy, to seek that social contact. But if you don't know what the disclosure laws are.
Because you're in a foreign country and you say, what if I'm put in prison? What if he discovers my tablets? If he discovers some paper that is, some information that I'm living with it, then what?
So with that being said, my advice to people who are listening to this program and to us here, we should then spread the word of where to get also legal advice, because we also have ACCHO, to give us all these legal advices regarding, what to do, besides also social workers, but at least because they deal with the with the legal, it's a legal clinic.
Exactly.
So it's important to also get information.
Right information.
And we thank Google, like you said, because I mean sometimes I feel like when you're in a situation, just like when you have symptoms of whether running stomach or anything like that, you just go on Google to find remedies, right? So I guess maybe, no, but sometimes you know how it is. You're just trying to understand
That's practical.
what is really happening in my system, because now we've got Google. There are people who live alone and you don't know, should I be calling my friends every time, to ask, this is what I'm going through. But at least Google is there. Sometimes it gives you the wrong diagnosis, but at least then try to seek for more information or medical advice, or if it regards having to get tested. It's a good thing in Canada now that you get really the right proper direction to say, oh, now this is your situation. Go to this department. Go to this one. But as far as ACB community, we've got a lot now, so it's good to
I have a question here for Tony. It says, does trauma or other mental issues impact an individual's ability to access new social norms around HIV, but rather live as it's the stigma that's going on. So okay, so not so, but I'm sure you can pick up maybe something from that, Tony.
Yeah, I think I can. So the two of the conditions that I mentioned earlier were PTSD and depression. Some of the general symptoms of depression: isolation, lack of self-care, sleeping too much or not sleeping enough, eating too much or not eating enough, inability to concentrate, inability to focus on tasks, hopelessness, not finding pleasure in activities, interests, lack of motivation. You know, if all that stuff is going on, how can somebody actually overcome that to do the things that they need to do for themselves? It's very difficult, and that's why I go back to being able to engage with what happened to you, being able to engage with the emotions, with the beliefs that were created to keep yourself safe and to explain why this happened. We have to be able to engage with those things, and then we'll begin to be able to see some resolution. In terms of PTSD, some of the general symptoms would be flashbacks, depression, anxiety, angry outbursts, emotional dysregulation, risky behaviors, substance use, nightmares, inability to trust, inability to connect with others. There's so much that is, in terms of the symptom, that keeps people from being able to connect with others, that without actually addressing some of that, it's going to be really difficult to build any kind of trust in anybody to be able to engage, and then to know when you can be safe to disclose or not to disclose, or when you can actually be safe to discuss whatever is going on inside you. Trust is one of the biggest things. Lack of trust is one of the biggest things that I find with folks coming in brand into the country. They don't know who to trust. You know, even I have clients who even told me, you know, I saw all the Black Lives Matter stuff on TV. I don't know if I can trust a white doctor. I don't know if they're looking after my welfare. There's so much going on that it's really, so unless we begin to address some of this stuff, it's going to be really difficult to take that next step.
And just to add to what you said, Tony, I remember working as an ASO, and we had clients that came in and they presented, HIV positive client presented very angry, belligerent, not listening, and not adhering to the rules of the agency and all these other stuff. And then when I was looking at doing I was doing some immigration, the PIF, you know, that thing that they have to fill out for government, and you realize the trauma that people went through, and you see those behavior are a symptom of something bigger. And I think as community, as workers, as ACCHO, as Black Cap, as AIDS Niagara, all this other stuff, making space for people to be able to come in at the authentic self and find out how you could support them to talk about those traumatic events. Because oftentimes all we deal with is housing, immigration hearing, and all that. And oftentimes I wonder, in my years of working at ASOs for 10 years as a counselor, where's those people that really, after the hearing and they get housing, what happened? And you see them on the street and you think like, the dealing with the trauma was never, the mental health issue was never addressed. So people are showing up the way they show up.
Yeah. And sometimes, you know, that's part of our experience as Black folks. We think that counseling therapy is for rich white people, and we don't see it as something that we can access. You know, some of us were brought up in the church, and we believe that God would fix everything. Different reasons that we have for avoiding that stuff. Yeah.
There's also the lack of access, especially as newcomers and refugees. A lot of people do not realize who to go to, where to go to, and also they're not being able to afford therapy. A lot of people don't know that IFHP, which is like the Interim Federal Health Program, covers therapy. They do not know that like it covers as much as even I think about 30 sessions per year.
I don't even know that.
Yeah, so a lot of people can access therapy that way. It also covers medication and like access to a psychiatrist, access to a psychologist, and all these things. So it's not just, a lot of people say, oh, I don't have OE, so I cannot access this in Ontario. But IFHP also covers that.
Wow, thanks for sharing that.
If I can jump back again one more time, I think Joy had said something earlier, had talked earlier about folks coming in new and getting infected when they arrive. And a lot of that has to do with, again, depression and not feeling that I have any worth, and trauma. If I feel like I have no worth, if I feel like I don't have no voice, then how can I negotiate sex with someone? How can I sometimes like people feel like they can't refuse an offer, and so if somebody says, you know, because I'm so depressed and I feel so badly about myself, if somebody offers to have sex with me, even if they want it to be unprotected, I have no choice but to say yes. And so understanding that we have the ability to negotiate and we have the ability to actually speak our needs and not just go along with what the partner's wanting.
That's right.
A question that, let me see, that came in, and this person is from Niagara, right? And is asking, how do I get on PrEP or access PrEP or PEP in Niagara?
So Positive Living Niagara runs the PrEP clinic for the Niagara region. So you would connect with Positive Living. My coworker Daryl runs the PrEP clinic. He does all the intakes for the entire Niagara region. From there, we have several partnerships with the community health centers across the Niagara region. From there, you will be connected to by a nurse. Whether that be in person or on the phone. Then from there, they'll set up blood work. And within a couple of weeks, you can get on your medication. Unfortunately, with PEP, because it's so time sensitive, that's 72 hours, the only place to access PEP is at the emergency room in the hospital, where they're able to do the blood tests and all that stuff to get you on PEP pretty much immediately. The only place to access it is the hospital.
I was going to add to that to say that in the Peel region, that is Brampton, Mississauga, and Caledon, Moyo runs the PrEP clinic for those areas, for the Peel region. So if you need to access PrEP, if you need to get your vaccines and all of that, you can always come to Moyo Health and Community Services and get all of those services. You can get your medication, access to your medication. We also have HIV self-testing kits. We can also mail those discreetly so that you have access and your privacy is very protected.
Yeah, we have the HIV self-testing kits as well. And like we've left them behind a bush and someone in a park on a sunny Thursday, right? So being able to access those HIV self-testing kits have really increased the ability to know your status and avoid the stigma of the smaller town health systems.
And just to add to that, I also do some research with Reach Nexus, and they do HIV self-testing, and they had research to show how many people, especially from the ACB community, the uptake in the self-testing test, HIV self-test was like up over the roof. I was even shocked by the amount of people that's doing it. So it's a good thing, and there's support in place that there's numbers you could call if you need people to help you do the test. So it's important.
Yes, there's videos online too that you can watch to be able to, like if you scan the HIV test kit, there's a barcode at the back that takes you to a YouTube channel that you can watch on how to get tested by yourself. So you can just get this test done at home.
ACCHO also has a great video.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Say that again. Oh, yes.
Well, I'm sure there is. Well, what's the, in terms of how effective PrEP is, how effective has that proven to be?
The research, have you
So for us as the ACB community, we're still lacking in access to PrEP in our community. And that's because we were never part of the conversation when it comes to PrEP, right? So I think we're still catching up in terms of like how accessible is PrEP and what information is out there and who have access and who could afford it and it's free. And all those conversations is your benefit covers it. Where can you get it? So I think those are the things. It's not as easily accessible as the HIV self-test, but there's HQ, I guess. I heard that they provide PrEP. I don't know if it's free though.
And there's a program called Prep Start that will at least get you the first 3 months for free. So once you're on it for those 3 months, at least here in Niagara, the nurse practitioner, the doctor that does the prescribing for PrEP, they will work with you to figure out a plan that works for you. Even for us, sometimes if somebody doesn't have coverage, we'll get them ordered in bulk in Toronto and then ship them just to reduce that cost.
I love how you say things like we were not included in the conversation.
Yes, yes. And that is profound.
Because I've realized a lot of social media into certain communities, especially the ACB community, how when we talk of PrEP and PAP, the amount of comments that are on PrEP and PAP are just so out of this world. Some will tell you, so are you trying to get this pill so that you actually contract HIV? And I'm thinking, so what do you know about the PrEP and PAP?
Yeah.
So I guess they still need to educate and create that awareness in our communities, in families. You know, when we go home, this is not just work, but amongst our friends. I try to do that so much. When I'm with my friends, I ask certain questions. We talk about some, things regarding, HIV, and just to find out how much they know. Do you know of this? Do you know? Yeah, I've just realized so many people don't know.
When people talk about it like now, openly,
Yes.
it becomes, the stigma, reduces.
That's so important to have
It
this.
is very important to normalize such discussion. Definitely. Because people are just hiding behind a finger.
Just like our slogan, I think it says, let's not hide in the shadows of HIV. And at the back it says, let's talk. And that's what we're doing. And right here in the chat, somebody just asked, can one travel from the African continent to Canada while being HIV positive and get a work permit?
Yes, I'm an example.
Yes.
I have a work permit and I just traveled. And one good thing is they do not even discriminate people with HIV. So I'm an example. I traveled
Right.
and they didn't even ask me about it.
Say it depends on the country because Nigerians, I know that like you have to do an HIV test and if you are positive, you might not get your visa. So I know. Yes. Yes.
Serious.
It's different. If you come as a student, it's different. If you come as a landed immigrant, it's different.
As
So
a
it's also
PR
a humanitarian, it's different. So it's all depend on the mode of how you get into the country.
And also,
Yeah.
I came for a conference for HIV.
Right.
I came even 2022 and I went back.
Right.
Then 2023, that's when I came to seek for asylum.
Right.
So what I'm saying is, even when I came in 2022, nobody asked me about my HIV status. When I came in 2023, end of 2023, nobody asked me. It was only when I was now applying for the work permit
Right.
that's they needed. And because I'm healthy, I did all these STI tests, everything, hepatitis, syphilis, gonorrhea, all of them. So, and I got my work permit.
I think the only thing that can impact you getting a work permit is if you have tested positive for
Yeah.
TB.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
And I think I just throw to a question online as well. Somebody would have just asked a question. We'll shoot to that.
I have a question. What are the invention tools available to use?
What are the invention tools to reduce stigma?
So there's a lot of invention tools that was created to reduce stigma. However, we need to find out if they're working. And as everything with research, you get funding from the government to create stigma index tools, stigma intervention tools. And then before you finish, it's funding finished, but there's some that is available. So intervention that create awareness is a tool that could be used. So intervention that provides support, intervention that normalize HIV. I think even like we were talking about here, normalizing it, having conversation. So like, how do they break down stigma? So they have different tools that they use, and I was talking about it before. Like if it's for people living with HIV, they would have like one-on-one counseling, group therapy, skills building groups, support groups. If it's for community, like let's say churches or community neighbors or whatever, then you might do something like more educational around awareness and educating people about what is HIV, just like what strategy workers, everybody does in the community. And intervention that we need to like that created, like, for the biggest systemic issue, we talk about things like U equals U and PrEP, scientific studies that show that people cannot get infected in those ways. So those are some of the intervention tools that was created. We still need more because we want to measure what tools work and just so that we could enhance it. And I think that's where we are.
And even this setup where people can ask questions, because some people don't know. They need to hear it from the person who is walking the walk,
Yes.
not just the talk.
Yeah.
So to be honest, this works.
Yes.
Because people can ask, so tell me, if you are living with HIV, can you drive? Can you go to work?
And
So-
I'm glad you said that, because most of the intervention tools that I've used and I've looked at in research, it also include people living with HIV. It never, so you would see a social worker and a person living with HIV facilitating a group. They were never left out of the conversation or the planning. And it's not just to sit there like a token, but from the stage of planning to implementation, they are every part of the conversation. And we talk about JIPA and MIPA in the same way, right?
So I think one more question is there because we want to get in the questions before we wind down, giving them an opportunity to filter in and then we can talk. So let's shoot to the next question and we go straight to Rooney. Yep. So or Rooney, do you want to go just before the question? You want to make that point?
No, we can go.
I mean, we're winding down. So after these questions, we're going to go into the successes. So we just throw to the question now.
Good night, everyone.
Okay, I think we had taken that one from the chat. How we got somebody's asking how they get PrEP and PrEP, right?
Yeah.
So we move to the next question because I think we did answer that, and we have the different ways how we can get PrEP. And Moyo is the same thing.
Yes.
Okay.
There's also a list of PrEP clinics on the ACCHO website.
So my question is, since dealing with PrEP my reality there is totally different from one out with my expectations and the things that I learned from me from my home are totally different now that I live in this here. I also have a lot of trauma that I experienced from my home. I want to know how do I cope, how do I transition into the norms in Canada, being that my expectations come here and what the reality is for me are totally different.
Tony, I think that's you.
You know, sometimes when we hold expectations, we kind of allow them to come true. So if I expect something to happen, I'm going to be looking for it. And to the point where even if there's just a hint of it, I'm going to see it. And that will keep me from engaging. And so sometimes it's about changing the thoughts. So if I have a thought that anytime I disclose my status to somebody, I will be rejected, I'm going to have to shift that thought a little bit. And I'm not going to lie to myself. I'm going to tell the truth. Yes, it's possible that I'll be rejected if I disclose. But from my experience with the people that I choose to be around, with who share the values that I have, who have shared beliefs, I don't expect to be judged by them. And so, yes, while it's possible that I'll be judged overall, I know that there's an opportunity that I will not be. So allowing yourself to shift those thoughts so that those thoughts that are absolute, that are so black and white, become shaded so that we're not expecting always the worst case scenario.
I like that response. Rooney, you want to comment on that?
I think just to add on a little bit of the light, obviously when you think, when you have your when you take care of yourself, including the mental health, it's unfortunately we only talk about it because now, people try to normalize mental health during COVID. But mental health, even for someone who is not living with, it matters because you then think clearly, you think outside, you overlook at some of the things in a positive way, not just in a negative. So having to then move from the thoughts of you moving and then having that change you still then have to create, that positive to say, you know what, obviously there's going to be so many different things. There's going to be probably a hard shift. So it's not just about,
Can I just say that as a newcomer myself, I think that like we have it's normal to have expectations as to what you think you would expect when you move to Canada. But like I know that we always say that you cannot teach an old dog new tricks. We are like as Black people, as African and Black people, we are made to adapt. We can cope with anything. You can teach an old dog, like you can always learn. We don't know about pronouns, all these things. We don't talk about mental health. We don't talk about all these things back home. You come here and somebody says their pronouns are they, them, and you're like, what do you mean they? How many are you? But like you come and then you talk to people and then you begin, like you respect them, you appreciate them and then you learn. Because the good thing is to listen and to learn. You adapt, you learn all these things.
It's Grace, right? What Grace said earlier is that you have to find community. If you find community, then you realize that you're not alone. Then you realize that other people are going through what you're going through. And all of a sudden, even though when it felt at a 10, now that others are sharing it with me, maybe it's at a 5. Right?
So maintaining a positive attitude and mindset as well.
I will go to the next question. I mean, they're blowing up the questions, and that's perfectly fine. That's good. And then after the questions, we'll just go into what the successes looks like, because we will have dealt with several topics. So we'll just take this question, and then we move into successes.
This question goes to Zoe. How does shame and self-blame impact someone's individual's ability to access care?
Thank you for the question. Yeah, I think we touched on that earlier. If I'm always looking at myself and thinking that I'm no good, that there's something wrong with me, that no one will ever love me, that the world is dangerous, that I'm always alone, if I have those beliefs, then it's going to be very difficult for me to make any movement forward, right? And so it's about resolving some of those beliefs. Lena, I think you had something.
No, I just wanted to add to say that sometimes shame and blame happen outside. It could be individual and you deal with it that way. But when it's structural, when it comes from like places like public health and all these places, you go to your support, as you said, Tony, find a source of support, find an ally, find somebody who has power of voices to really to advocate on your behalf. I had a situation where this woman tested HIV positive, and public health told her partner that he should go to the cops and report her. And that is like shaming and blaming, right? And say not finding out the situation. So how can public health or people in position of power, structural people in institution could change that to provide support in a way that, like, to find, like, I'm really sorry this happened to you. Can you tell me more about what kind of support you need? And change the narrative so that people would feel supported. So people will feel like the shame and blame that I'm feeling, internalizing, it's not really, I have support to get it out, right?
Self-blame becomes something that a lot of people who've gone through trauma, who are living with PTSD, end up trying to find a way to control the events around them. And so if I can blame myself for what happened to me, then maybe I can do something to keep it from happening a second time and a third time. But that usually doesn't happen because we don't have that kind of control. We want that kind of control, but we don't have it. So that self-blame just ends up causing more and more harm rather than giving us control of other people's actions, because we can't control what people are doing around us.
I want to do a big shout out, and then we go to the next question. Carell McKay, she's in the chat, and she's blowing up. She's very engaging, right? Answering some of the questions too and offering support in the chat. And also to give a big shout out to Carell McKay. All right, let's shoot to the next question.
So why is it so difficult to access care as an ACB?
Why is it so difficult to access care as an African Caribbean?
So I've learned something today. I didn't know that. I was listening to this woman. I don't know if you guys know of her. Her name is Camille O'Ridge. And she was she actually was one of the founding members of Black Cap. And she talked about healthcare and access and healthcare and support. And it's because, part of it is because that we as ACB people are not included in the healthcare model. That's one of the biggest things. And I just found out that in order for ACB people to access support, like healthcare support, the best way, the only option they have to have holistic health, to look at us as a people, is through community health center. I didn't know that.
We're also learning.
Also, historically, Black people have not been given the reason to trust the system.
Exactly.
There are incidences of them racism infecting, like historically. Remember the incident where they poured acid into the pool and infected people with syphilis. In Nigeria, I knew that. Yes, I know that. Like they infected some people with they gave some people wrong vaccines for smallpox or something that left them disabled. So there are like so many reasons why people do not, that is why it's so difficult. People do not see any reason to go to the system because you don't see people who look like you often when you even go there. So yes,
We talk about historically, but I mean, today people are still experiencing racism and discrimination in the healthcare field. So, I mean, it is challenging when already you have this fear of what's going to happen when you show up, how you're going to be treated. And then we know things like racism impact physical health and mental health and health just as an overall thing. Then you go to the doctors for your physical health, and then you experience the racism that perpetuates your health issues.
The way that they dismiss your concerns sometimes. I remember going to the doctor, just mentioning like my condition. The doctor said, "Oh, there's nothing like that." I'm like, "What do you mean there's nothing like that?" And so you see, and it took me being able to advocate for myself. But not everybody would be like me. Not everybody would be able to speak for themselves, because when the doctor says there's nothing like that, you take their word as final. Like you just say, "Yes, this is."
So much.
Yes.
My daughter's being tested for Crohn's, and every time we go to the doctors or the hospital or a specialist, they kick me out of the room to ask me if I have food in the house. I'm like, I have a university degree, a college diploma, and they kick me out to ask her if there's food in the house. Every single time, every time we meet a new doctor.
Yeah, the system was not created for us. We need to know that the system was not created for us.
Wow.
Right. We live in a very racist system.
Wow. And so just a few more shouts out. So we have Nicole in the house, in the chat. We have Jace. We have Samoya. We have Sunny. That's asking some really good questions there. Perfect. We will take one more question, right? We will do one more question. I think we have a final question, and then we'll start looking on wrapping and bringing this conversation together. But I just want to, acknowledge the folks online. Thank you so much. We so far, I think we had over 55 person joining, right, and engaging in the chat, and I think that was really, really good. And just imagine the amount of person that will watch it afterwards when it's posted. So I think the conversation is happening, right? And we know that we just want people to know that you're not alone. You're not in the fight alone, right? And we should keep on having sessions like these, conversations like these, and we can keep on looking on ACCHO's Instagram Live, following our campaign that's going on, which is linking lives to care. We have so many resources on there, so many phone numbers that will point you to different healthcare providers or resource personnel, whether we're to get information, medication, advice, counseling, etc. And so we'll throw to that final question, and then we will take a wrap.
Good night, everybody. My question is, what diseases that newcomer to Canada from North Caribbean were with them that HIV treatment or how we interact socially? Thank you.
So what are some of the myths and
I think we already talked about some of them. The fact that there's no HIV in Canada, the fact that if you go to, like, you don't have health insurance, you cannot get care. There are like so many myths like that.
You can't get work permit.
Yes.
Because, you know.
So HIV is only for people who are having same-sex partners.
Yes.
But I also think that we also have to again and look at it from a place that everybody's reality is different. So I come from the Caribbean, and my mode of coming to Canada was different. So if you come to Canada as a visitor and you stayed at suburbs, there's a lot of undocumented. You come here and then you apply to get a humanitarian and compassionate to go. Obviously, you can't get medication. So that's a reality, right? So those are not those are some of the myths are there, but also the way you treat it. So I live in I'm from, as I said, the Caribbean, and people with HIV comes because the nurses, the doctors, they disclose their status, they tell everybody in the market. They can't go on the buses, they have no transportation to get home. This is the reality. People, you hear stories about people who, we had clients who's like had little shop. I don't know how it is in Africa, but in Caribbean, your little shop was burned down because they found out that they HIV people were run out from the community and all that. That's the reality. That's what they're coming into Canada with. So I think that oftentimes that treatment is following them when the community treats them the same way. So how do we depend that? We have places like ACCHO, we have places like AIDS Niagara, we have places where people could go, Moyo, a Black Cap, Women's Health and Women's Hand, where people could go to get the support they need to help them cope with those kind of stigma and get this, look for allies in the community that will stand up against those things. I think the only way we could debunk those things and helping our community is to form those kind of things, as you said, like just to say this is not okay. Talk to your family members. I mean, I know for a fact that example is that I came from the Caribbean. I swear that water in the Caribbean is homophobic, but we have to like we come and then like when I talk, my mom's like when I talk to my mom and she would make comments and use terms. I was like, Mom, you can't say that, and here's why. And we need to stand up and challenge our community. You can't just stay silent. Because trust me, people with HIV know if you're faking or not. They know who people are homophobic, who are gay or LGBTQ. They know if you're really an ally or not. You could say it when you're working in the space, but do you really mean it when you leave the space and you go outside? So that's what we need. We need a community that cares. A community could stand up, and a community could support and be an ally for each other and say, this is wrong. You don't say this. You don't do this. You don't everything. If you could stand up, I stood up in my church the last time and I said, my daughter said to them in the church, she's like, my mom will never sign those things because I don't agree with it. And I would say that I could say it in my church, I could say it. And when my kids look at me, they know that I am who I am. I'm not saying one thing in my workplace and saying one thing outside. And I think we need to be those voices. Not everybody could do it. And I'm not saying everybody, but those of us who could do it, use our power to support people that is coming in who don't have those power, who don't have the ability to do that, because some of them could lose a lot. Some of us have nothing to lose, so we could do it, right?
Yes.
That's good. That's good. And as we wrap up, and as I will just go around this table, and as each of us give our closing remarks, I want us to add what success looks like in our closing remarks. Amidst all the challenges, the systemic barriers, the trauma, the stigma, the pain, the discrimination that we'd have faced, the nightmares. I want us to look at what success looks like as we close. And I literally just start from my left, and I start with Rooney. I just ask, how does success looks like? How have you seen that?
I would start with when you serve a community well. We have had so many people who come with feedback, even with AIDS Network, over the work that they are doing. And the impact of creating awareness, even to the community, that's success. When you create awareness to people, and they come with a good feedback to say, I didn't know of this, and they're very grateful. And for me, success, as far as everybody else who doesn't have HIV, it's either you're affected or infected. And sometimes it only takes that small moment, that time, So it's good to be informed, learn, and the power of information and knowledge that we're already sharing. That's what success looks like for me.
Thank you. That's powerful. That's deep.
Lena.
For me, success for me look like this. We here. We on Instagram Live. Can you imagine? This is success because I've been involved in HIV work for over 30 years. And for me, this is success. Success is having Black Health Equity Lab. Success is like having Tony doing supporting community. For me, these are the successes. These are the success story. Having people, but if you were working in an ASO in the early days, it's either HIV or you're gay, right? Now there's all kind of community dying to work in community. So I think that is what success. We've been here coming as a community. We have all these people online joining. For me, that is success.
Lovely, lovely, Joy.
I think that success for me looks like one, free from discrimination, free from all of the systemic barriers that we have mentioned. It is not enough to just say, oh, we want to end HIV or we want to do 95 by 2030 or by 20 and set up all these dates. What it looks like is even back home in the African, Caribbean and Black community where there is no discrimination, there's no homophobia, there's no transphobia, any form of bigotry in the system. I think that is what success looks like for me. I do not have to call my girlfriend my sister when I go out. Yeah. I think that is what success looks like for me.
Thank you so much, Joy. Grace.
Oh, I have two major ones. The first one, when you look at me right now, I'm bubbly, I'm glowing. ARVs are a success because I did not just start taking ARVs. There are a lot of people who are taking ARVs who died or who are still, going to the stage of AIDS. So for me, just taking ARVs consistently is a success. And, when I attend major conferences, I get to meet manufacturers of ARVs and they ask, so what are the side effects? What? And they try to curb them. Yeah. That's good. You become a patient advocacy. They want to see the efficacy of the medication. And then the second one that I also want is community building. I really like that. And I salute all those people who are working for Positively. Although I really salute you because for us, some of us, these are, this is good because we are alive because of that community building. And these days, people are actually calling on social media like this because someone would also want to say, so who is Grace? Where is she? What is she doing? Things like that. So, they would want to know more because of this community building that you have done. So I really call that a success. And I want to salute you, all those people behind it,
Yes.
I salute you.
Thank you so much, Grace. Thank you for sharing your success story. Megan, how does success look for you?
So I think success for me has been more people coming out like Grace, sharing their stories and creating those spaces for people that are living with HIV to not feel that isolation, loneliness. I know when I first started at Positive Living Niagara, I couldn't get an ACB volunteer because we are a small community, and within the ACB community, it's even smaller. You go to the same church, you go to the same barber, you go to the same place to get your hair braided. And now we have more and more people that are like, no, forget it. I am living with HIV, and that is my truth. And if you don't accept me after that, then so be it. So success for me is more people like Grace coming out and creating those spaces.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Beautiful. And Tony.
Well, as a counselor, I've learned to not wait for big successes to actually recognize, because if I wait for the big outcomes, then I'll lose motivation. So I have to recognize every small step that someone takes forward. For example, I've been working with a gentleman from Jamaica. He's HIV positive. He arrived here about 8 months ago. He has been not dating, and because of the fear that he's gonna end up being rejected if he discloses. And so after 8 months, 3 weeks ago, I met with him, and he had actually disclosed to someone who he had gotten to know, and he'd gotten to know them, their values, know that they wouldn't reject him. So he disclosed that. On the heels of that, he then arranged with his sister and his brother to be in Jamaica with his mom, so he could tell his mom that he's gay. So for me, every little step counts, and I have to measure every success.
So much. Yeah, it's very good. Yes.
Personal growth, like when you start taking care of your health, like for example, safe sex practices. I was telling you that when I came to Canada, they tested almost everything. It's not like I had to make an effort
Yes.
to be healthy. So for me, success is also taking care of your health, like the well-being of yourself, and trying to find out how best can I access these mental health, practitioners. How best can I stay in the right frame of mind without, getting out of mind. So my personal growth also counts, as in getting to always look after my health, getting, those full blood count tests, liver function tests, all those things, just to know where I am, like milestones after being tested. And like I said, 29 years, it's not smooth. It has all these winding ups and downs, rivers, what. But even amidst all those challenges, it's a success that I'm telling you. I am here now.
Yeah.
I can even stand in those conferences, for HIV conferences, and say, here I am.
Yes.
I'm living healthy. The only time I was in hospital was giving birth. So you see, that's a success for me.
Yes.
So I really want to also thank God and thank these ARVs, these community building,
Yes.
networks. I really want to thank you guys. When we openly talk about these things, it becomes acceptable and it becomes normal to talk about it. It's not like you are name calling, you are stereotyping. So for me, this is success. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. What a night it has been. What an enlightening discussion. And I think that is very important. And what success looks to me is this here, the conversation that we're still having. It might not change the systems right away. We might still have the systemic barriers when we step out the door. We might still face discrimination. We might still be pointed out. We still might be denied the health services. We maybe still face the trauma, the hurt, and the pain. But guess what? We're still in the fight together. We're still having the conversations. We're still sharing with those that are out there. And that is a symbol of success. And so I want to thank each and every one of you that took the time out and sat here tonight to offer your knowledge, offer your support, offer your advice. It is important work that each and every one of you are doing. The persons online from the different agencies, I see Irene, I see staff members from Black Cap, I see Bishen, I see Nicole, I see Team ACCHO is on, my director, my manager, Nangio and Karel, Etsy is here. Everybody that would have been a part of putting this program together, who would have promoted it, who would have sent it to their clients, who have been here, I want to thank you for joining. It is important that we have these conversations. I also want to extend a big thank you to the production team that we have here. I think that they're phenomenal at what they do, right? And we could not hit the airways without them. And so we give thanks for that. I also want to salute ACCHO, the African Council for African Caribbean Council on HIV/AIDS in Ontario, for doing the work that they're doing. They currently have the Linking Lives to Care campaign. And what we realize is that newcomers and persons that come into Canada, linkage is so important, and we realize that it is not happening. And so we would have taken the initiative to coin such a campaign to link lives to care. And so I want us to follow ACCHO. share the page with a friend. Look out for the different messaging. We should be looking at various topics throughout the year. And so we want to focus on stigma for this quarter, right? So we'll be pushing different contents out, and I want you to be engaged. Share it with friends so at least we can get the word out there. It is indeed a pleasure to have a program like this, and I'm encouraging people to replicate a program like this. Have the conversation in a nice, relaxed setting so persons can digest it easily, right? And I want us to look forward to the fourth staging that will be coming up in a few months. We'll be having deep discussions, hitting some of these topics because it can never be too boring. It can never be too overrated. We must continue the fight and continue these discussions. So thank you once again. Thank you for joining ACCHO, and do have yourself a wonderful night. Walk good, and thank you, thank you for being a part of After Dark Chat. Blessings. All right. Yes. All right, so give me a hug. Ah, God.